Hey guys, welcome to another video from the Parrott Bros. Now today I'm here at Sean with Motivelectronics.
Motivelectronics.
Always helps if you remember the name. And basically we're here to get the clocks remade, fixed, repaired, looked at, checked for the TT, because as you know they are a common problem and mine have a few issues which we're going to address today. So I'll pass you around to Sean now.
Thanks, Don, for the intro. Hi, guys. So before we start off, I'd like to take you through how we do the testing of the clocks. We achieve that by having a rig that we built to run on the bench, which means we can test most of the features of the clocks without having to have the car. This also enables us to calibrate the gauges to ensure all the needles are in the right place and all the motors are working correctly. So if I just turn the clocks around on the bench here and show you the back, you can see we've got this cable loom here, which obviously comes from a car. We've modified the loom slightly to bring power into this loom. And you can see here that we've added an OBD2 port, which enables us to connect up a code reader, like in this case it's VCDS, and that's what enables us to test the cluster further than otherwise would be possible, and also to do the gauge sweeps. So to get started, we always connect up the clocks first when they arrive and run a test to see what the state of the clocks is first. So if we switch the power on, you'll see the clocks power up when the lights come on. Obviously all the sensors aren't connected, so we get warning bells and we see warning icons come up on the screen. And you can see here this one's got a very bad LCD, which is a common problem for these clocks. Now we can go a stage further here if I use the VCDS software over here and open up the instruments menu. We can do output tests and then run that test. And the first thing it does is sweep the needles, and you can see the dial sweeping across, all four of them. Okay, and then the needles return to a known stop position, park position. And for the TT cluster, that's 62 miles an hour on the speedo, or 100 kilometers per hour if it's a European clock. Half tank of fuel, 90 degrees on the temperature gauge, and 3,000 revs. Now you can see that this particular clock has got the needle in the wrong place. So straight away that'll get addressed when we rebuild the unit, because we have to remove all of the needles in order to get to the LCD inside. So the next step we go through is we make a note of the problems, then we disconnect the power and then start to strip down the clocks to get inside and get to that LCD display.
A little bit about yourself and the company. So what else do you do? I know it's not just TT clocks, is it?
Yes, we do a number of electronics modules for different cars. We've not been going that long. I mean, I started this really from a passion basis, because I've been into cars for a long time.
And you did electronics previously?
Yes, yeah. So my background is electronic design engineer, did a lot of work in the medical imaging industry, and as part of that got into repairing very complicated electronics. So I've got a background that's quite deep in this. It enables me also to reverse engineer some of the circuits that I'm working with. So some of the units we do, I'm the only person that actually repairs them anywhere in the world. In the case of the TT, of course, there are other companies doing the same thing. But that depth of knowledge really helps doing things like building these rigs up here.
Yeah, of course.
And of course getting into more esoteric problems than perhaps,
so people can get in contact with you if they have a problem. I mean, you've got a Ferrari ECU up there, you've got some GTO parts as well.
So here, for example, this is here we have this is a suspension control ECU from a Ferrari 458. We've done a number of projects on Ferraris and Lamborghinis. It tends to be quite small volumes, but again, there are some cases now with Ferraris and Lamborghinis where you also simply can't buy the parts anymore and they have to be repaired. And of course, as classic cars become newer, in inverted commas, you get into the 2000s, there's a lot more electronics in them than there used to be. In days gone by, you could you get your seats reupholstered, you get the metal work done, the body work done, the paint work done, the mechanics done. Now you have to add electronics to that list.
And it can be quite a costly. How much is a new one of these Ferrari ECUs?
I think this ECU is about £800.
So if they could spend a few £100 getting it repaired, obviously it's still going to be a lot cheaper than buying a new one. So
yes, yeah, exactly.
Ideal.
Yeah, we've done that a few times. Sometimes the cost of repair is like 10-20% of the cost of a new unit. So
plus it's nice to be able to reuse rather than throw away, because the new one could fail the same as the old one. So
yeah, and increasingly, of course, things are becoming unavailable. So in some cases, we've got customers where their car's off the road and there's no other solution.
Yeah,
you can't get the part.
Yeah,
anymore,
of course.
So you have to
especially at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Blimey, right. So how do we strip this down then? Is that the next step?
Yeah. So obviously we have to power off. So we turn the power off, like so. Flip the unit onto its face, and then we can remove these connectors from the back. So 3 fairly easy self-latching connectors. Just lift these coloured bars up at the top, pushing the tab in there, lift that thing.
I had great fun trying to get them out on my car upside down with the steering wheel still on.
Yes, yeah, it's more difficult when it's on the car. But at least looking at it this way, you can actually see what you have to do.
Yeah.
So pull that off. There's also actually a grommet in here somewhere where this is clamped back, but that just pulls out. So.
Yeah.
So that's it, just the 3 connectors. They all pull out like that. And then, yeah, if the unit's in the car, of course, you can then finagle it out past the steering wheel.
Give it a good spin round.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, so the first thing we have to do is turn the cluster onto its front. And the 2 pieces are held together by these screws here and these 2 clips. So we've got to separate the white piece from this black fascia.
Yep.
Flip it up. Now we start to see the inside of the clock. So
okay, so what do you do now? Now you'll be removing the dials, the sweeping. Yeah.
So there's a couple
needles.
of things.
Needles. That's what I'm looking for.
A couple of things you can do in different orders here, but usually I would take the cluster here and drop it out of this housing.
Oh, okay.
And this is quite interesting because actually it's got like internal clips, and you have to squeeze the cluster in the right place to pop it out. Sometimes it just drops out, and other times it doesn't. So you've got to squeeze it here, and it will just release. But it's a very odd. Sometimes it goes easily, and sometimes it doesn't. There we go. That's one end.
Yeah, you can hear it, can't you?
Yeah, and then this end. There we go. There we go. That pops out like that.
Ta-da!
So again, kind of squeeze it here, roughly opposite that screw hole.
Oh, you can see the little cutouts, can't you? Just on the inside there.
Yeah, actually it's at the end, I think, is where it actually is latched.
Okay.
When you squeeze it, it pushes that out. But just squeeze it like that and a bit of pressure on the connector and it just pops out.
Oh.
So put one
So
side.
if anyone fancies doing it themselves.
Yep, there you go. Right, so now I'll give you a guided tour of the actual cluster itself. So on the front side, obviously you've got the faces and the gauges, and we'll take those needles off next. This is soldered onto the front side of the board, but it's underneath this plastic housing that holds the dials. I'll take it on the back side, so you can see a bit more here. So, so you've got the main gauge motors for the back to front here. So that's the speedo, the rev counter. And you've got these 2 guys up here, which are fuel and temperature, and the microprocessor for the cluster is here. And you've got some of the the little what do you call those things from the front?
For adjusting
the buttons for controlling
the
clock and things. Yeah, come through from the front. And all this has to come apart. So we have to take out needles. And then when we take the needles out, we can then remove this board, the printed circuit board, off of this white plastic piece here. Yep. And that gives us access to them. We can then pop these guys out, which I think actually is the hardest part. And then we can get to the LCD and remove the LCD off the board.
Oh, you have to take them off to.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So these have to
because they only go through, don't they? I suppose. Yeah.
They do go through. Yeah. So you've got to basically these white pegs here are part of this plastic.
Oh, okay.
Right. So because they're clipped in, you can't separate the board from the plastic.
Oh wow!
And the plastic is in front of the LCD.
So to do just the display is quite a big job then.
Yeah.
That's probably the bigger job, because if you replace the stepper motor, you can do that whilst it's off.
Correct. And that's why when I talk to customers before they send their cluster in, I ask them, what other problems have you got?
Yeah, of course.
Because now is the time to fix them.
Like you did me, and I give you a list.
Yes, exactly. So in this case, the motors we've checked, the motors seem to be fine. Sometimes they're not, but the cost of changing the motor when you're doing the LCD panel is just the cost of the motor, because we have to take them out anyway. Yeah. Right. Okay. So what we'll do next is pull the needles off. Now this is an interesting one where I've got a bit of a technique here, and you won't believe the tools that I use for this.
Is it one of those, a case of it works really well? Yeah,
it's the best. It's the best technique, and I have to say I didn't learn this myself. I actually saw someone else doing this, and it actually works beautifully well. So the tools are 2 teaspoons, and the reason for that is that they're nice and smooth on the back,
so
they don't damage the fascia, and they get under the dials. Because with these needles, you've got to be very careful, because these grey areas are actually just a cover, and they're glued onto the body of the needle. So if you pull on the grey piece, you break it and pull the cover off. So this will get underneath. Yeah. And lift it up. So basically you kind of finagle that onto both sides like that. A bit of pressure and just lift. Easy as that.
Look at that. Good dream.
And as you can see, the needle is off. Tray there. Absolutely not a mark on the plastic.
Yeah, perfect.
So that's how you get those off. You may see that there's 2 little tags on the white plastic that stick out over this. Yeah. So what you need to do is just basically sort of grab it with pinch it between your fingers at one end, pull it up. Upwards and then off one end and then off the other end, and then it comes off perfectly.
Because I remember back in the day when people used to put the old Lockwood dials, or the white ones, or the
That's a good point actually you raised, Don, because there are still aftermarket dials available for the TTs. Yeah, there are.
I meant to ask that. I'm not bothered, but it was interesting to know
Yeah.
that there is.
And I've not used any for the last few years, but the one point to bear in mind is that the quality of those things varies massively.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Particularly at night when they're backlit. So
Because it just bleaches the whole area.
yeah,
It?
you get uneven illumination and bright areas, cold areas, and often the edges are very undefined. And if you look at the back of this, it's got some very clever printing on it, which is done by Audi to try and distribute the light properly. So if you do buy aftermarket dials,
make sure
choose
you buy
carefully.
The good ones, yeah.
Yes. And you can see here, the LEDs are visible through the plastic here. These are all illumination ones, and you can't really see them very well. But there's a couple of red ones that sit behind each needle.
Just to give it that glow. Yeah.
Yeah, they illuminate the needles. And sometimes they do fail as well. Get some dead needles and not lit up. Right, now the next stage is to remove this plastic piece here so we can get to the solder joints. You can just see the edge of the ribbon connector there. And this, I think, is the hardest part. So what I tend to do here, mainly because the plastic here can be quite brittle, I've actually seen other people that do this say, oh, well, just get new motors and break these to get them out, because they're so hard to get out.
Yeah.
These ones not so bad, but the fuel and temperature gauges are quite difficult. Obviously, we want to reuse these, so we're not going to break them. But you can see that they are essentially, the peg is just moulded into this plastic and it's pushed into the plastic here, and they're clipped. So to get them out, you've got to pull these out a bit, and then you've got to pull this up, the gauge motor up, and at the same time pull the pins out of the connector, which is on the other side of the board. So it's a little bit tricky.
It doesn't sound particularly easy.
And there's nothing you can really use as leverage here, because obviously you've got all these components around. So you do need a little bit of leverage. You've got to be really careful where you go, because even where there are no components, you can see there's very thin tracks on here.
Yeah.
And if you go through one of those tracks, you've got some problems on your hands. So you've got to be a bit careful with that one. So what I tend to do is I tend to heat it up, warm the plastic so that it's a little bit more malleable. Yep. Yeah. So I'll use my hot air gun over here to do that. Yes, we can see all the motors are removed, and these white plastic pegs that hold the motors in are just part of this plastic here. So the next step is to basically separate this printed circuit board from the white plastic. It's held in several places, so you can see these white tabs here.
Yeah, I was about to say it's the tabs, isn't it? The pins are just for guides.
Yeah, these will just slot through. Yeah. But we got to watch out for is that these displays here.
Yeah, attached.
Metal tabs here.
Yeah.
Right, and you can just push these in. They have to slide out as well. What you don't need to take off is there's a separate piece of plastic here. It's just the
okay, yeah.
Bit, but don't touch that. You don't need to take that off. It doesn't do any harm if you do, but it's a needless step. Right. So what I usually do here, sometimes you need a little pair of pliers or tweezers on these, but sometimes they just go with your fingernail, and they click.
Yeah.
Click, and they all click off like that.
The screen stay attached to the
back on the So and this dust gauge pin comes loose. It will actually fall all the way out but it doesn't matter. So put that to one side with the other parts. Okay, so finally we've got the board down to the bare board itself, and you can see there's the display, and that's the ribbon cable we have to remove. It's worth noting that you can see here there are some pins that are unused at the top on the printed circuit, so when you put the new one on, you're lining up to the bottom. And that's it. So it's essentially ready to come out now.
Cool. So we're going to be installing the new display now. So we've cleaned off the old one. Are the displays from anywhere special, or?
Yeah. Well, they're
electronic supply place, or?
Yeah, there's a place in Scotland I get them from actually. I don't mind sharing. There's a place called AK Speedo.
Yeah. Just good quality.
Yeah. Well, the good thing about those guys is they're based up in Stirling, and I trust them implicitly because they also test everything themselves as well. So
that's
everything they send out is tested.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be soldering one of these on and have it not work.
Well, I guess you could probably buy one off the internet for £5 or £10, but you obviously take your life in your own hands with that, don't you?
You can, yeah. Although even these ones are not particularly expensive. I mean, to buy the actual display is around about £16, £17.
Oh, so they're quite cheap.
They're not very expensive.
Most of the cost is taking this thing apart, isn't it? Let's be fair.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And you can see they are slightly different. And particularly the electronics part is different.
Yeah.
I think you can still buy these. Maybe not. If you can find them, they are about 4 or 5 times the cost of these ones. Yeah,
and I'm guessing the newer ones are probably better, as in the remanufactured ones, should we say?
They are brighter. I'd say slightly lower contrast maybe than the originals though.
Okay.
But you'll see when we power it up.
Yeah.
They're pretty good, and these ones are good. If you buy really cheap, you can get rubbish.
I mean, 16 to 20 quid's hardly expensive, is it?
Right, exactly. And I've spoken to the guy that owns AK Speedo.
Yeah.
So I know they go through this testing process. So I always buy my materials from there.
That makes sense.
You know, I don't want to buy rubbish and put it
No,
in people's
well,
cars.
exactly. It's not going to last, is it? So.
Nope. Right, so what we do here is make sure these tabs are not. There's a protective film on the top.
Yeah,
of
I was
this,
about to say, yeah.
So we'll leave it on for now, and then just
Yeah,
we can drop this in. You'll see there's I think this is a light sensor here. This thing here that goes round on the back. But again, this is where you don't have to touch this.
Yeah.
There's also like a light guide here. So this thing is like if I change the angle, you can probably see the So you don't have to touch that either. And this just slides under the two tabs there, like that, and it'll just clip in. Pull the black tab back a bit, push it down, and it clicks. That's it. That's in okay. Make sure it's seated properly. Yep, that's in. Right, and you can see that the ribbon cable kind of sits roughly where it's got to go.
Yeah.
Now the technique here I find is we put lots of solder flux on the solder that's on the board. There's usually enough already on there to make the joint, and we can check it afterwards anyway. You need a fine tip.
Yeah, I was about to say that is tiny.
You can see
you put your hand behind it so you can see.
Yeah, so you can see that's
minuscule. Yeah.
So it's basically almost like a pinhead type bit.
Yeah.
And also use good quality solder. Now, solder these days is generally lead free. The lead free stuff is rubbish for this, I find.
Okay, so now you've replaced the screen. I say we, I haven't done nothing, I've just sat and watched. You've replaced the screen, it's all soldered on, so what do we do now? We test it? Is that the next
yes, we can test the display before putting the rest of the cluster together. Doesn't do any harm at all.
I'm excited now.
Yeah, so you'll see that some of the back LEDs and warning lights come on as well, but you know, we can ignore those. But this just to verify the display is good before we start putting it back together again. So we just plug it in as we did before, it's the same connectors, and then just power it up.
I'm excited because in my ownership it's never been right. Look at that, look, you can read the word.
And there we go.
I love it when people send on the group, they'll send in a picture and it'll be all this, but it'll be half missing. They're like, what is this? What is the fault? Like,
yes, yeah.
It's like
looking at a picture on a puzzle with half the pieces missing. What does the picture show?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
That is incredible. Looks so good.
So there we go. So the next stage now is to start reassembling it, which is, as with all these things, is usually the reversal of a disassembly.
Yeah.
So,
now comes the best bit, putting it all back together, yeah?
Yes, it's reassembly time. Just careful to line everything up. Things do tend to move around and shift when you're doing this, so you've just got to be...
Yeah, well, especially with those two screens as well.
Yeah, they don't tend to move, it's just a question of trying to get them all lined up so all the pegs go in, because they do tend to...
There's a few of them, isn't there?
Yeah. Keep gently pushing it. And get the white tabs on first, these white clips.
Yeah. So then that's holding the bezel down onto the card.
Yeah, and then you can individually press these guys in to let them click in place. They should...
I was going to say, I heard a couple of them go.
Yeah, they should just click it like that. There we go.
Yeah.
And then these ones here. That one's not in yet.
Have a look. Can you just show the motor on the camera? We'll show it closer.
Yeah, so
put your hand behind it so you can see it.
So that's the...
Oh, yeah.
So that one is the Speedo, the Taco, the same.
Oh, okay, so how many pins has it got? It's got 4 pins that go through.
Pins. 4 pins that go through.
And then the motor part, yeah.
And that one's
the fuel gauge
fuel gauge one. Other connectors are... the white pegs have to line up, and the 4 pins of the connector.
Yeah, because I guess you'll be looking at one and not the other, and then...
Yeah, so when you get them like that, you see it's...
Yeah, feeds through.
They're pretty much in the right place. And then sort of wiggle it and push it at the same time, and it just clicks in like that.
Oh, it's 10 times easier than
removal. It's a lot easier putting them back, yeah. And obviously when they assemble them in the factory, they do, they just click them straight in, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't generally have to take them apart. You can make sure they go through the holes properly. So you can see that's lined up, and then we can just push it. Sometimes with these you need to get your fingernails on the edge of the tabs to push down here.
Yeah,
like
just
that. Yeah,
seat it.
Yeah, because there's a risk of breaking the plastic at the bottom here, because they are quite fragile.
Yeah, of course. If you break one side, then the likelihood is it won't seat properly, and then you're stuffed.
Yeah, basically you should really put a new motor in it. It probably would stay in with one side, but
it's a risk though, isn't it?
Risk.
That's the problem.
Yeah, and the risk is, of course, if it goes wrong, you've got to pull it all apart again. Slide this over the top. Use the thing as a guide. Right, so to do this, you go up a little bit under the first little tab on the...
Yeah,
and then
pull
it down and click. You hear it click.
Yeah.
And then this side do the same. So So you've got to go under the top one like that, and then under the bottom one, and it clicks, and then it just
it's home, yeah.
won't fall off. Can do is power it on first, which will put the needles in more or less a park position. So in theory, you could in theory actually do these without VCDS.
Yeah.
Because especially the speedo and the rev count, they do tend to sit on 0 when they're in their park position. It's a bit hard on the fuel gauge and temperature gauges, but we just put them on very gently to start with. Remember, of course, these things do fit very tightly when they're properly pressed on.
So what do they sit in? You can put them on at any angle, any position, couldn't you?
They're just a friction fit.
Oh, it's just a snug fit.
Yep, that's it.
Plenty of room for error then.
Yeah, it's completely variable, and also some of them fit tighter than others. I've found. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is for that, but they just do. So again, this one. So
you kind of put them in the lower park position where they would start from empty.
Yeah, roughly speaking.
Roughly.
So that's kind of a rough assessment. At this point, of course, you can also check that you're.
Everything's on properly.
Yeah, we should be able to.
187,000 miles.
Yep. Again, using VCDS.
Yeah. So you go on to into what was it? Instruments.
Instruments, yeah. And there's a menu choice called output tests. It's going to output tests.
Yeah.
And then you hit the start button, and the first test it does is the needle sweep. So you'll see it sweep the analog indicators, and they should go full range. So something like that, and they flick back. And again, the needles should sit rev counter at 3,000 RPM, temperature gauge at 90, the fuel gauge at half, and the speedometer at 62 miles an hour.
Okay, so the gauge is going back together now. So you've cleaned the back. Now we're going to do the front because, let's be fair, it's minging.
Yep, there's a bit. And we've just clipped the cluster back into the housing. It's the reverse procedure of taking it out. You just need to check that these connectors protrude by a few millimetres at the back, and if you give it a shake, it shouldn't fall out. Then you know it's clipped in. If you don't get this right, you can't put the black front panel on anyway. And the next step we go through is to clean the cluster glass. So over years, the cluster glass gets a
bit hazy, doesn't it?
Yeah, you get a film on the back of it. And the lovely thing about the TT clocks is they're actually real glass, not plastic. So when they're cleaned up, they look like they're brand new. You don't get any scratches in the glass. In most cases, I've seen a couple with a couple of scratches, but generally they're pretty good. And this is just a question really just using some Windoline, or you can use some hand cleaner. The sanitising gel works quite well. But we'll use good old-fashioned Windoline and a clean microfiber cloth. I don't tend to spray the backs of the clocks, I spray the cloth.
Yeah, I always tend to spray the cloth when I do anything, because then you're controlling
where it goes.
Going,
yeah, that's right, to damp the cloth up, and then just like clean your windows.
Yeah, really. I must admit, it's been annoying me for ages, because you can just see like a film, even when you clean the front.
Yeah.
It's like when you clean your car windows, isn't it? If they clean the inside, it doesn't matter how clean it is, if the outside's still dirty, it'll still look crap.
Exactly.
So that's the clocks back together, complete.
Yeah, cool. Most got to put the screws in the back yet, and the little bit over the steering column, but that's the front panel back on and clicked in place with the two tabs at the end, and you can see it's nice and clean now.
That's lovely. Now, what we did notice with this was if you flip it over, on the back there's a sticker that says that one that's folded over. 2006. Now my car's a 2001, which means these clocks have probably been replaced from Audi. I guess at a later date, because they did have. You said it was a recall, wasn't it, where they went through and replaced the load?
Yeah, they're a
not a recall, but when they failed, you have to bring them back and they'll swap
exactly. Them. Yeah. Audi were obliged to get them replaced free of charge. So a lot of the clusters were changed out. Yep. Okay, so we'll put the
screws back in and the trim back in, and we're done.
And we'll retest it.
Lovely.
Make sure at the end it's finished and working properly, and then we're done.
Cool. So that is us done then. What are we going to do? Just one last test.
Yep, so one last test to make sure it works before we ship it out. So
it looks so much better clean.
Screws are all back in at the back. Yeah, all the glass is clean, so it looks pretty much new. So we power it up as we did before. And the display will come back up like that. So we can see that's all working.
Readable.
Yep. And you can also see the digital displays are working as they should.
Yeah.
And we'll run through the gauge calibration again on VCDS just to make absolutely sure that's okay. So we just go in and select instruments again.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to have to do this on my other one. For sure. See what's wrong with it.
Okay, we go to output test like before, and then it'll run the sweep. And can see most notably this time the rev counter is now correct.
Yeah.
And there we go. So
Also their lovely park positions.
correct park positions, yeah. Again, 3000 RPM, 90 degrees C, half a tank, and 62 miles per hour. So that gauge is all done.
Perfect. Well, thank you, mate.
My
so
pleasure.
that is the gauge complete. Now, guys, if you need anything done, let me bring it round onto me. If you need anything done, I'll put all Sean's details down in the description. So it's Motivelectronics, and they can do all sorts of things, not just TT stuff, but obviously if you have any problems, it is an idea to write down your problems before contacting Sean, just so you can let him know that you've got a dodgy fuel gauge or a dodgy rev counter or your display's broken or any other reason you can think of, right?
Yep.
Because
absolutely.
it helps you with the repairs, it helps order parts, and it obviously keeps it quicker, because once you take your clocks out your car, you can't drive your car. So the less time it's away, what do you sort of, is it 2 working day kind of turnaround?
It's 2 business day turnaround, but if someone gets in touch and want to do it faster, we can do it in within the same day.
Hertfordshire based as well, so they can
South Hertfordshire, yes.
South Hertfordshire, so you can drop it off. You can also pop and see me for a bacon butty as well while you're here.
Excellent.
But yeah, thanks for that, Sean, and thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you on the next one. I hope you've enjoyed that. Bye for now.